everybody. Thank you so much for coming along this evening. This evening's webinar is Understanding Behaviour as Communication. It's very similar to a webinar we did last year, but we had quite a lot of feedback that you wanted to talk about behaviour again. So that's what we're doing. And it's with me, Kim Barnettson. I'm the Child Minding Partner for the Stronger Practice Hub, and I can't see the chat usually while I'm presenting, so Damon will look out for the chat for me and just let me know if I'm missing anything, but I'm very happy to be interrupted, so please feel free to unmute yourself and just shout out at me if you've got a question or something you want to add. Here's our agenda for the evening. We're going to think what does the EYFS say about behaviour and the other non-statutory frameworks that we use. Looking beyond the behaviour, understanding reasons behind behaviour, thinking about strategies for co-regulation, thinking about the terminology we use, thinking about professional curiosity and working in partnership. And then the Slido is the Q&A, share your ideas and tips. And then what we're going to do slightly differently tonight is I'm going to make this webinar slightly shorter. And then at the end, we're going to have what we're going to call a coffee break. And that's going to be a half hour where we can discuss absolutely anything. You can ask questions, you can chat between yourselves, anything at all. It's just for us to have sort of free an open chat, and then there's a bit of information about upcoming webinars and bespoke support. Okay, so there we go. Let's get started. So the EYFS says that childminders must support and understand behaviour. That the key part there is understand behaviour. We must be aware of significant changes in behaviour and concerning comments of behaviour. And adults, for development matters, adults should model positive behaviour and recognise and give specific praise for positive behaviour. Quite often children get generic praise. Well done, great job. But actually, if we can give specific praise, it's much more helpful for children because they know exactly what it is we're praising and what they should replicate. And Birth to 5 Matters has a lot to say about development, about behaviour, more than any of the other documents really. But I've just picked out one key bit, which is adults should recognise that challenging behaviour is a manifestation of feelings, and the adult's role as co-regulator is critical in the development of self-regulation. So what do we mean when we say that behaviour is a form of communication? We have to think about children don't often have the cognitive ability to explain feelings and experiences in the same way we do as adults. Children's executive function is not fully developed. In fact, we know now, and we'll go into it in a bit more depth in a moment, that executive function is not fully developed until the mid-20s, which does explain some of that reckless, risky behaviour that you sometimes see in teenagers, excuse me, and young adults. Children may be replicating behaviour seen elsewhere. Children may have diagnosed or, most probably for us, undiagnosed SEND needs, and they may be struggling to understand those social boundaries. And sometimes it's a learning style that might appear as challenging behaviour, like a schema. So we're going to unpick these a little bit now and come up with some strategies to support them. So language and communication. If you've been to any of my other webinars, and specifically the language and communication one we had quite recently, you'll know that children don't have the cognitive ability, very young children anyway, to explain their feelings the same way we do. We know that it takes children roughly 10 seconds to receive information and process information and then express their thoughts or feelings on something. That's a long time. And actually, if you're very young and you don't have that self-regulation skill yet, and your executive function hasn't kicked in yet, then 10 seconds is too long. So often children will act on impulse rather than step back and take the time to try and explain what's wrong. We've all seen that, like this poor child here. We've all seen that child, haven't we? They've got this immense frustration and instant rage at some perceived injustice. Whether we feel it's an injustice or not, we should take that seriously. But they might just not have the language skills to explain it, or the time between the thing happening and the rage happening to stop themselves. So we have to think about how we can support that child. We also have to think about how children communicate in many different ways. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a croaky voice today. Verbal and non-verbal, and we need to be alert and responsive to how they communicate. So how we can do that is model language of self-regulation and empathy. And we can use resources such as, I've got here the colour monster, but there's a whole range of resources that support emotions, aren't there? Or you can make your own quite easily. But more important than any resources is you modeling that language of self-regulation and empathy. And that type of thing means things like, it's okay, you go first, I'll wait for my turn. Or I've finished with that now, would you like to have it? So it's modeling that type of behaviour, as you'll see a little bit later on when we talk about turn taking and modelling behaviour. That's really key here. This is the key strategy, because we can't speed up children's self-regulation. We can support it and we can help it to develop, but it's still going to take a little bit of time, isn't it? I have to say, though, if you're using resources, for example, Colour Monster, it really does help to just be generally talking about feelings and having that emotional literacy. I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel worried. Whatever it is, really helps children to be able to explain how they're feeling, and then that really helps them, doesn't it? That helps them to sort of communicate with you and with others about actually what's going on, so we're not having to guess why they're behaving in an angry way. So we said about executive function, didn't we? So for anyone who's not sure what that is, that's our ability to stop ourselves acting on impulse. Our brains are still quite primitive, as clever as they are, and we would normally act on impulse because our brains still think we're living in the Stone Age and the saber-toothed tiger is coming to get us. So we don't pause to think, we act first. Self-regulation is the like the little, in the cartoons when you're little, the little angel and devil on the cartoon character's shoulders. The angel is like the executive function, saying, hang on, wait a moment, just stop and think. Is that the right thing to do? Children just really don't have that executive function. They're starting to develop it, and we're helping them through co-regulating. But as we said here, that's not fully developed in humans until their mid-20s. So when we're dealing with, or working with, should I say dealing with, when we're working with very, very young children, of course, they're going to struggle with their self-regulation, and we should expect that and support them to do it. This is why, you children do lash out or grab things or push children, because it happens so quickly. That impulse to do something to defend yourself is so quick. There's not a gap in for them to even think about what they're doing. So we know that self-regulation involves children's developing ability to regulate their emotions and to help them act in a positive way. And to support self-regulation development, it comes out of co-regulation. That's us working alongside the children to find ways to resolve whatever the issues are, to give them the tools to resolve these issues. And the foundations of emotional and cognitive self-regulation are tied together in this. We really need to support children in the way that we support every other aspect of the development. If we think of it like that, we're supporting their cognitive development, their self-regulation skills, their executive function development, and just in the same way we would with anything else. So we have to work alongside them, modeling, giving them the tools to manage self-regulation and manage issues and negotiation.
Kim, sorry, someone's put their hand up, wants to say something.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Uh,
Sorry, I haven't got. Sorry, I haven't got the hand signal symbol on mine. Yes, please unmute yourself and just shout out. That's fine. Thanks, Damon.
Thank you, Kim. I just wanted to know when you said in early age their development is not completed and they can't think. So I wanted to know what age limit is that? Like around what age we can expect the child? I know every child is different. So what would be the approximate age when we started expecting children to have some control?
Oh, okay. That's a really good question. And you're right, it does vary from child to child and varies from circumstance to circumstance. So you'll see a little bit later on when we get to the bit about our sort of social batteries and whether our expectations are realistic of children's development. Um, I would say you would normally expect a child that's 4 to 5 to be able to um, more often than not control that impulse to lash out or snatch or push. That doesn't mean it's never going to happen. And as they get a little bit older, so 5, 6, 7, they're going into school, and it's developing all the time. But a 1 year old, a 2 year old, a 3 year old, some 3 year olds are able to self regulate a little bit more, but it's so overwhelming, this flood of emotions and impulse, that they just can't cope with it. So it's I would say you 4 or 5, sometimes 3. Um, but we'll look at, in a moment, about whether our expectations of development, as far as self-regulation are concerned, whether they're realistic. So and then we can bring that up again in the chat. Actually, I think that would be a helpful thing to see whether people agree with what I'm saying. Does that help, Samia?
Yes, thank you so much, Kim, for
Yeah.
answering. Thank you.
Yeah, it definitely is an individual thing. We all know some adults who can't self-regulate, don't we?
Yeah, I
You know,
understand completely. Yeah,
we
yeah.
definitely know some teenagers that struggle to self-regulate. So, um, to expect a
Mhm.
3 or 4 year old to self-regulate, it's sometimes a big ask. But that's a very good question. Thank you. Okay, so if we have a look at a 1 year old, what does co-regulation look like for a 1 year old? It means being calm, using an empathetic tone, being cuddly, calming them down, just being that calm person in the background, talking gently to them. We don't need to do anything particular. We don't need to discuss what's happened or why they're upset. We can just be calm because they're very little. These things happen very quickly for them, don't they? We're looking at a 2 year old, they're starting to understand a little bit more. We can start labeling emotions then, can't we? So that they're developing this emotional literacy. So, um, for example, I know you're feeling sad. I'd feel sad if that happened to me as well. That type of thing can really help children. I feel really worried when I go into a dark place as well. Whatever it is that you think that child is struggling with, using that language that of empathy and labeling how you feel and how they might feel is really helpful. Um, Offering comfort, obviously, when they feel overwhelmed. We've all seen, haven't we, a sort of 2, sometimes 3 year old completely just lay on the floor and scream. We've seen that happen so many times, haven't we? And that is when they're overwhelmed with that flood of emotions. It's just and feelings, and this sort of perceived injustice of whatever it is that's happened, just overwhelms them. In that moment, you can't try and talk them out of it. You just have to be calm. There's no point trying to tell them about things that have happened. They're not listening. They can't listen. They're overwhelmed. They're dysregulated. Um, One thing we can really do that helps a lot is model turn taking. It starts when children are very little, and it's a good thing for all of us to learn that we can't have what we want immediately, but it's okay because we will have a turn eventually. And we model that through our everyday practice. That's really small things like, it's your turn to choose the book today, and it's Fred's turn to choose the book tomorrow, or whatever that is. You get to choose which I don't know, CBeebies program you're going to watch, or you get to choose which way you walk to the duck pond. Whatever it is in your setting, even if it's something like having a ball like this and you're rolling it between you, it's turn taking. It's starting to understand that it's okay. I'm worried that I'm never going to get that ball back again, but I know that I will. And that's that beginning of the self-regulation through co-regulation. So turn taking, when you're modeling it, is a form of co-regulating. So in 3-year-olds, obviously they're understanding a little bit more, aren't they? So we can start providing more tools about how they can cope with things. We can say, I can see you're feeling very excited. A lot of feelings are in your body at the moment. Why don't we go and run around in the garden? Or would you like to have a big cuddle? Whatever it is, you can usually gently redirect them, because these things that upset them are usually quite fleeting, aren't they? Again, the key is a calm routine and environment. We'll see in a moment that that really is key to self-regulation, is modeling the behavior you want to see in the child. And in 4-year-olds, so moving on a little bit in development, but as Samia quite rightly said, all children are different for all sorts of reasons. Um, so here we can give them even more tools and more empathy and more emotional literacy. So it's okay to feel upset. I'll help you. Let's figure this out together. Don't solve problems for them, because we're not doing them any favors if we're solving problems. If I'm taking the orange stacker block away from this child and giving it to the other child, that's not helping them to work it out. But we can work it out together. The key phrase, I know I have said this a lot in my webinars, but it works like a magic wand, is, and embed it really early on. Can I have a turn when you're finished, please? So we said about turn taking. Once we know that I will have a turn eventually, even if it's not this very second. And then the other child who's got the resource, whatever it is has some agency over when they give it up. And actually, most children, especially if they're in an environment which is calm and empathetic and models kind, empathetic behaviour, are okay to give. Oh, I've finished with it now. You can have it. Or, you know, I've nearly done it. I'm just going to put the car down the slide one more time, and then it's your turn. You have to let children manage these things themselves, because otherwise there's not going to be an adult there forever. And negotiation skills are a key part of self-regulation. And as part of this, we need to think about how we're managing sharing. Now, I know in the past, obviously, I've been childminding a very long time, like some of you have as well. We would have said, "Oh, it's Fred's turn for 5 minutes, and then it's Sarah's turn after that." Or we would have taken something away from a child and said, "You've had that for long enough now," and given it to another child. We know better. We know that is not supporting self-regulation. It's just upsetting everybody, and it's not helping the child eventually with the tools that they need. So this is just how I do it in my setting. For example, when we have children that bring in transitional objects from home, or maybe not a transitional object, but a favourite toy they just bought because they really want to bring it that day, what I say to them is, if you're okay that other people might look at and share and play with your toy when you're not using it, that's fine. You can bring it in. If you don't want to share it with anyone, that's fine too. We'll put it in a special place, and we have a dresser top where we put any of these special things. We know they're there. The children know they're there. We all know we don't touch other people's special things on that shelf. So that really helps that with that issue about something special from home, someone else has got it. But also we need to think about how we consider sharing. Is it right to make a child give up something they're engaged in because another child wants it? Let's say if you've got one of those little spinny chair things. I've got one out in my garden, and a child is on it and they're engaged and they're really having a wonderful sensory experience. And another child comes to you and says, I want to go on that. And we say to the first child, oh, stop, you've had long enough on there now, it's the other child's turn. Really, should we not be letting that child finish and saying to the second child, just hold on a moment, I know you'd waiting for a go, but don't worry, she'll be finished in a little while because look how much she's enjoying it. So we're using empathy, we're modeling the type of behavior we expect to see from the child, and we're not controlling the situation by stopping one child and moving the resource to the other child. So that's something we need to think about. I'm sure all of you have moved on to this way of sharing as well, but I do occasionally see it in larger settings that I go to, and it's not really beneficial to the children in the long run because that means they always turn to an adult to solve the problem rather than negotiating it themselves. Okay, so we spoke earlier, didn't we, about learned behaviour? I've said it quite a few times. So a little bit of info here on the theorist Bandura, he's called, and he is famous for a research project called the Bobo doll, which is this weird clown that you put in the corner of a room. It's one of those weighted things, so you can knock it over and it'll pop back up again. So imagine two rooms, each with a Bobo doll, each with a group of children and an adult. In one room, the adult behaves violently and aggressively towards the Bobo doll. They hit them, they say nasty things to them, they push them over. And then the adult leaves the room and the children replicate that behavior, as you can see in some of the small photos on the side. In the other room, the adult behaves in a kind, empathetic way and gentle way to the Bobo doll, and then they leave the room. And the children who have witnessed that empathy and kindness and understanding were much more likely to replicate the same behavior. So we need to think about the overall experience that the child is having and what they're seeing and hearing as a way of us understanding where any of their behavior might be coming from. For example, are they in a home with a teenager who's angry and cross and slamming the doors? Are they in a home where there is domestic violence? Are they in another setting which is loud and overwhelming and not enough resources to go around, and so everyone's fighting and arguing over the resources? That gives us an idea of what's going on behind their behaviour. Okay, so with learned behaviour, as I said, we need to model empathetic, calm responses, and we need to think about enabling turn taking as part of just our everyday practice. Now, I know when I see you out and about and at different things, that you're doing this anyway. So really, that's not something I need to tell you to do, but it's still helpful. So we need to be just embedding that into our everyday practice. Take a turn at this. It's your turn now. It's so-and-so's turn next. Or ask the children to work it out themselves. If they're a little bit older, they might be able to work. Who's going to have a turn at setting the table today? Let the children decide. Anything we can hand over to the children to manage themselves really increases their sense of agency and just power over a situation, but in a positive way. So I would say definitely do that if you can. So then let's think about children who may have diagnosed or most likely in our settings undiagnosed SEND needs, because very, very young children quite often haven't got to the point where they can be referred, even though we might be seeing some of those additional problems coming up. We might have a sort of few red flags. We need to understand their triggers by working with either the school, the preschool, wherever else they are, and their parents. But do we need to readjust our behavioural expectations for those children? Because a child who has SEND needs where they're really struggling to regulate, to self-regulate, even an older child, you might have after-school children, for example, are we expecting them to be able to self-regulate at the same level as other children their age, or should we readjust our expectations as if they were self-regulating as a younger child would be? Again, this is really dependent on the individual child, because each child, whether they have SEND needs or not, is an individual and has their own triggers and background and experiences that influence and inform their behaviour. So it's really all about knowing the child really, really well. That's what helps you to understand their behaviour. So then we said about learning styles, didn't we? So some of you may have come to the schema webinar that we did. Um, but learning styles can often be misinterpreted as challenging behavior. For example, schemas. Now we know, don't we, that a schema is a cognitive development system in the brain which drives children to test and explore to build their knowledge. It's an overwhelming urge. It's not something the child can really control. And for anyone who's not familiar with that, you can always look back on YouTube and find the schema webinar. If not, get in touch with me and I can explain it. But there are several different types of schema. So if we think about a linear schema is lining things up, rotational schema is rolling around, turning things around, rolling balls down things, or a trajectory schema, as this child seems to have, is throwing things. Your brain is saying, test what happens when I throw a beanbag, and then when I throw a shoe, and then when I throw my lunch. It's saying these things that the child cannot always control what they're driven to do because the brain's trying to absorb all this information. Now, that can be seen or could be seen as challenging behavior. But actually, we need to know the child really well and recognize what's going on with that child. Is it challenging behavior? Or is it something else like a schema? And if you can identify it as a schema, then instead of stopping or trying to stop the child, which is very, very difficult with a child with a strong schema, we shouldn't be doing that. It would be bad practice to try and stop a schema. Instead, we can enable it. So for example, you've got a trajectory schema going on with the child. You don't want them throwing shoes and throwing their lunch, do you? That's going to hurt other children. It's not a safe or healthy thing for anyone to be doing. But you can have an area where they can throw things out in the garden, perhaps. You can have a basket of things that, yeah, you can throw whatever you like there. You can go to the pond and throw sticks and stones into the pond, or if you're lucky enough to live at the seaside, go and throw as much as you like, throw as many stones as you like into the sea. So we need to enable that learning, not try and control it or stop it, because it wouldn't be the right thing to do. It's not best practice. We should be supporting schemas that are very effective learning tool for children. Now, as we were saying earlier, Samia, we were saying about social batteries. I think I'm going to get one of these badges. I think we should all have a social battery badge. Are our expectations of a child's behaviour realistic? Let's think about a child who's had a wonderful night's sleep. They've got up, they've had breakfast, they're on top of the world. Everything is tickety-boo for this child. Their ability to self-regulate is going to be much higher than a child who is tired, pushes another child because they've got in their personal space, or an 18-month-old who hits another child because they don't have the ability to self-regulate and stop themselves, or 4-year-old snatching a toy from another child. Are they feeling poorly? Have they had a really horrible day? Is it the very end of the day? So even adults, as we said before, find it hard to self-regulate when we're tired, stressed, or ill. We are all much more grumpy when we're tired, stressed, or ill. We're much more likely to get cross with someone, not necessarily children, but with your family or whatever, aren't you? If you're feeling tired or you're stressed or you're feeling ill. And so if that's us as adults, we need to sometimes think, hang on, this behavior for this child, is it because they're tired? Is it because they're ill? Is it just because they're very young and they're not able to control those impulses yet? So sometimes you might need to think about what we call the design of the day. If at 4 o'clock everyone's tired and grumpy and grouchy and self-regulation is non-existent, is that a time to rethink how you do things at that time? Maybe that's the time when you all sit down and have a snack, or maybe it's a time when you all sit down and read stories, something quiet, something calm, that sort of takes away from that moment of stress where everyone's getting angry and cross with each other. Of course, there's different things happening different days, but that's just an example. One thing I really want to touch on here is it's so important to recognize that the child is not the behavior. So, what we're really looking for here is what is that behavior saying to us? What is the child trying to communicate? And then we're trying to support that. Is it a learning style? Is it that they're modeling behavior that they're or copying behavior that they've seen modeled elsewhere? Um, is it that they are struggling with their communication? Whatever it is, we need to recognize that what's going on behind the behavior and that the child is not the behavior. So we no longer use terms such as tantrums, spoiled, lazy, careless, aggressive, attention seeking, uncooperative, inconsiderate, or misbehavior. Um, we wouldn't want any of those terms used about ourselves or about our children, would we? And we shouldn't use them about child-minding children either, or children in our settings. We can use terms such as dysregulated or challenging behaviour. Imagine as a parent coming to the door and being told that your child had been aggressive and attention seeking, when actually you could say, he's been really tired this afternoon and a little bit dysregulated. That's a much more positive spin on it, isn't it? You're still being truthful, you're still explaining what's happened, but we're not labeling the child as the, heaven forbid, naughty child. Also, the phrase managing behaviour, really, we're not using that so much anymore. Instead, we're using, as was in the EYFS, understanding and supporting behaviour. So, understanding what's going on, supporting it, putting strategies in place that support that individual child. And we talk about the behaviour and not the child. We use terminology that promotes and reflects understanding, empathy, and support. So, like I said, he's been quite tired this afternoon. He's been a little bit dysregulated. So we've sat together and read some stories, or whatever that is. And I know you probably all know this. And when we did the working in partnership webinar, we spoke about how we manage these sort of interactions with parents in a most effective way, which is not to spring it on them, but also no parent wants to hear that their child has been uncooperative, misbehaving, whatever it is, having a tantrum. They don't want to hear that, and that's not the correct terminology that we as professionals should be using. And part of that is because when we label the child, we diminish their self-esteem. They're no longer Fred, they're the naughty child that has tantrums. We overlook concerns. So we don't know what's going on behind that behaviour. We didn't bother to find out because we just labelled them as the behaviour. And we fail to hear the voice of the child. So what I mean by that is we fail to hear what that child is trying to communicate through that behaviour. So we know about working in partnership, don't we, from our recent webinar? And I'm sure you're all aware that if we work with the parents and other settings that the child attends, we can provide consistent boundaries for the child, which makes the child feel secure. It can be really confusing if some places they're at are much more relaxed in the way that the children behave, and others have different expectations. You can agree strategies together. How can you support that child when they're dysregulated? Also, by working in partnership with the parents, you get to understand what's actually going on at home. Is the child hearing or seeing things at home that they are then replicating in your setting? Or do the parents have a particular parenting style? Are they particularly strict? Are they particularly lenient? That might be influencing that child's behaviour. And also challenges at home. What's going on at home? Are they moving house? Are they in temporary accommodation? Whatever it is can be influencing the behaviour. So you will only know those things if you speak to the parents. And I know how difficult that can sometimes be with some parents, but it is our statutory obligation in the EYFS that we must work in partnership with all families in our settings. Now, we said earlier that if we label the child as the behaviour, we fail to look past the behaviour to what's behind it. So now we know that behaviour can be seen as a form of communication. We need to get curious. And actually, I would say we should always have professional curiosity. You know, we used to say to children, put your listening ears on. I would say we all need to have our professional curiosity ears and eyes on all the time. That means what's going on with this child? How can we support them? What do we need? Who do we need to work with? Social worker, possibly safeguarding, possibly Senkos, whatever it is you need to do. And if you're in a bigger setting, who is responsible for doing this? So we should always have this professional curiosity about our children, understanding what is actually going on in their lives, because again, that whatever it is, let's say for instance, it's a safeguarding issue and the child is suffering some form of abuse, that will be showing up in their behaviour. So we really need to make sure that we don't just dismiss the behaviour as a tantrum, but look behind it to say, actually, what's going on with this child? Because their behaviour has changed quite a lot in the last couple of weeks. So that's what we call professional curiosity. It's a really important part of our safeguarding as we support our children. All right, okay. Now it's over to you for your Slido. So this is, have you got tips for supporting behaviour or working in partnership with parents and others, specifically around behaviour? And what happens when these strategies that you've put in place don't work? What's your next step? How do you proceed past that? So feel free to pop anything on there. If for some reason Slido isn't working for you, don't worry, pop it in the chat or just unmute yourself and shout it out. Whichever works for you, I'm quite happy to do for you to do either. I can see a couple of people are typing. Let me quickly check the chat because I can see there's a couple of things in there. Okay, Shirley, thank you. What if the child on the chair never comes off it until the time they go home? Well, do you think that's very likely? Maybe that's a good question. I think it's probably quite unlikely unless you've got a child that has quite extreme sensory needs and needs to spin on that chair. What about if the time they go home is only in 20 minutes? Are we going to let them carry on for 20 minutes? It's I would say it's okay because that chair is still going to be there the next day, isn't it? That child's not going to be on there for 8 hours probably because they're going to get off on and off and have lunch and that type of thing. And sometimes I just think if there's a child on there for hours and hours and hours, that child's probably got some undiagnosed sensory needs that you need to have a look at. But it's a very good question. Yeah, I think it just depends on the time of the day, doesn't it? Yeah, Dana, so you're using timers. You've got very young children in your setting, haven't you? And I did read some research once about using timers, which was that children are much more likely to share or take turns if something mechanical is telling them that it's time to swap over rather than an adult telling them, which is quite interesting, actually, isn't it? I think that was something to do with children and TVs. If you had a TV and the timer automatically switches the TV off or the computer game or whatever, then you just children just accept it or are more likely to accept it. But if they have a parent that goes in and turns the TV or the computer game off, then they're less likely to accept it. So yeah, visual aids, photos, objects, these are all really good resources. I agree. So Shirley, I have a 4-year-old that if she knows others will want to go, she'll keep the toy or stay on an activity till 4:30 when we start getting the potties and nappies on. Okay, well then in that case, Shirley, maybe you could use a timer. Have you tried using a timer? Do you think that might work? So you say 5 minutes, 2 minutes, then 2 children would get to Would you like it now before I get to 1 minute? Oh, okay. Do you know, I think one thing you could do there, Shirley, I said about um, handing that responsibility back to the children rather than the adult always having to sort out these issues. If the children are old enough to understand what you mean, give them the timer. So they've got a big egg timer and they turn it round and they put it on the um, next to that spinny chair or whatever it is that they're on. And then everyone knows when the sand gets to the bottom, it's time to swap over. And then the child on the chair gets up and turns it round and they know it's their turn again. Um, that's a form of control for that child, isn't it? So maybe it might be worth thinking about other forms of control that she might need or why she's craving that form of control. But I do know what you mean. We've all had a child like that in our setting. Um, Angeline, okay. Oh, hi, Angeline. A mobile timer seems to work well with us. They respond well to the sound. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Sand timer outside for turns on the trampoline. Yeah, oh, that's good. So maybe then that would work as well for that other child, mightn't it? Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at Slido. Using others as positive role models, sense of responsibility, and peer modeling. Yeah, that's a good idea. And also being specific about what they're doing that you would like the other child, not saying, um, oh, Fred, look at Sally. She's really good at whatever it is, but just praising Sally so Fred can hear in the background. So you're just saying, Sally, I really, really like it when you help me to tidy up. That's a really kind thing to do. So yeah, you're quite right. Using that modeling and specific praise. Distraction and diversion, yes, definitely. And I know that some people don't think that's the right thing to do, but actually, we're working with very, very young children whose attention spans, as we were finding out last week or the week before, weren't we? Are like, what, 6 minutes max? So we really um, need to um, not worry too much about that. If that's the thing that works in that moment to help that child to self regulate, then distraction is good. Role modeling, my turn, your turn with a child in the setting, use a tap top box or bucket to encourage turn taking. Excellent. I mean, turn taking really is part of everyday life, isn't it? Um, so, and it's something we can really help uh, sort of instill in children as a coping mechanism, really, for self regulation. Um, What if the child is snatching and refusing to understand it's not their turn yet and physically fighting and not listening even after you've tried distracting? So that child is dysregulated, aren't they, when they're like that? I mean, I don't know that child or how old that child is or what's going on in their background. Have a think about why that child behaves like that. Their self regulation and executive function are not as highly developed as maybe their peers are. And so they don't have the ability to stop that impulse to snatch. Um, what you have to do there, you have to embed, well, I would suggest embed those tools. So, yes, I understand you want that car that Fred's got. Fred's got it at the moment. So, what could you say to Fred? And are you say not even listening after you've tried distracting? So, maybe you need to think about some working with the parents to put in place some strategies to try and support the child. Definitely during calm moments, not when the child is dysregulated, talking about emotions and sharing and being kind. Obviously, we don't want children physically fighting, so that's something where you kind of physically separate a child. Um, and it's very easy in that moment to say to that child, and I'm not saying that you do this, to say to that child, "No, you mustn't do it. You mustn't hit your friends or whatever it is." But actually, in that dysregulated moment, they can't listen because they are dysregulated. So their brain is not focusing on that. They're overwhelmed, completely flooded with emotions and anger and just pure rage. But in their calm moments, that's when we need to talk about when you feel like this is what we can say, and that's the moment to do it. And some children struggle more than others, so you do just have to keep putting those strategies in place. um, you might have concerns about that child in other areas if that's happening. Obviously, it depends how old that child is. But I would definitely say speak to the parents and find out what's going on at home. Have they got siblings at home where there's a lot of fighting and arguing? In which case they're modeling the behavior, they're demonstrating, sorry, replicating the behavior that they're seeing modeled. And so that's where you really need to speak to the parents about that. But I would say put in place those strategies we've talked about, modeling, empathy, specific praise, working with the parents, talking about emotions and having that emotional literacy in place. Instant visual rewards. Yeah. Yes, definitely. If that works for you, that's great. Generally speaking, we've sort of moved away from sticker charts, haven't we? Because you've used the right word here, instant. Because very young children just that it's no good having a sticker at the end of the day for something you've done because you can't remember what it was. But if it's very specific and they're getting that sticker straight away, and you're saying, "Oh, this sticker is because you tidied away all of the cars. Well done." That's a really really positive way to do it, and it will help them to remember later on why that they got that sticker because they did a specific thing. Visual timers now and next, lovely. Yeah, working with the parent to get a full picture of the child. Yes, exactly. What are their triggers? So we're talking just then about that child that's angry and physically aggressive with those children. What are the triggers for that child? Is that child tired? Are they just angry all the time? Have they not slept well? Are they not eating correctly? Healthy, balanced diet? Were they up really early? As I say, are they arguing with their siblings? We need to look at the whole picture, look beyond what that initial behavior is. And I completely empathize with you because, having been in early years for so long, I've been in those situations before, and it can be really difficult um, in the moment, can't it, to deal with that? In terms of working with parents, what can be implemented that is realistic for parents as well as the setting so it's consistent? That's a really good question. I would say you can share resources so that you can talk about things with the parents. You can share ideas about the tools that we give children. So, can I have a turn when you're finished, please? We can, especially, no offense to anyone who's only got one child, but if you've only got one child in your home, they never have to wait for a turn, do they? So, putting very simple strategies in place where they have to wait for a turn, even if it's the parents are, it's daddy's turn to choose what to watch on the TV tonight. Um, it it's really helpful because we need that to be really consistent all the time. But again, it's really dependent on that individual child and their individual circumstances. Lots of people are using timers, which is good. Distraction to wind down for challenging behavior. Yeah, because when they are dysregulated, a child just cannot focus on anything else. So a bit of calm, winding down time, a little bit of distraction, maybe just a cuddle on the sofa, excuse me, can make all the difference because you've just burst that bubble of anger. And that's what we need at that moment, don't we? Yeah, communicating with parents, ask them about behavior at home, exactly. Looking for triggers, exactly. Visual timers, shadow other, I can't read this one, shadow other staff members for tips. Very good. Yeah, especially if you're in a bigger setting. That's a very good point. I was just going to check if I've missed anything in the chat. So I know maybe sometimes when you come to these sort of webinars, you're hoping that I've got the magic answer to these questions, but I haven't because I don't know all of these children individually, and their situations and what their triggers are. So I can only give you what is proven when we're using the early years evidence store. It's proven evidence of strategies that support children. So that's what I can give you, and then you can hopefully use some of those strategies in whatever way that works for those children. One thing I do think is that we do really need to uh, have expectations about. Obviously, we want expectations of nice behaviour for children, but are our expectations of children's behaviour realistic. So sometimes I think we're hoping that children have a more control than they have really, and that's why we have, you everyone's seen a 2-year-old laying on the floor screaming in a shop or something like that, haven't they? It's just the way it is, and it's just not realistic, and we don't want that to happen. It's embarrassing for the adult as well, but it's sometimes we're just not realistic. So I'm sorry that I haven't got the magic wand apart from that phrase. Can I have a turn when you're finished, please? So I think it was when we were talking about that child that stays on the chair the whole time. Maybe that child, you need to focus on empathy and being kind to other children, not when she's on the chair, but when she's not on the chair, when you're all talking about how nice it is to be kind. And as someone else said, praise kindness in others within her hearing so she can hear it. And with her as well. If she does anything that's kind or empathetic, really praise her to the heavens about it. That would really help, I think. Social stories, yes, that's a really good idea. I really like that idea. Time, space, and comfort, yes. I have a child who loves anything silky. She has a bonnet that's silky and a bit of cloth, and she used to take it to bed, and now it's left on top of her bag, and she goes and gets it. Took a few weeks of constant reassurance, and she's nearly 3. That's a brilliant example of a transitional object. And a transitional object can be absolutely anything. It can be a random thing that a child has picked up as they're leaving their house, the first thing outside by their door. Or it can be, as in this case, something that's been with her a long time and is her special thing. Um, and yeah, that's a lovely idea, and that does help children to self-regulate. Sometimes if they've got a transitional object, just helps them to calm down a little bit. Allowing a child a safe space and sitting alongside them when they're dysregulated, naming how they might be feeling, but not expecting them to communicate and respecting that they can't hear you in that moment until they are ready, but allowing them to see you are present when they are ready. This is like absolutely yes, 100%. I always remember I had a child once who came in my front door. I've got like a little sort of lobby area at the front, and it's very small, this space, just to hang the coats and wellies and things up in there. And he was very angry with his mum as he came through the door. And she kept trying to hug him and kiss him and talk to him about things. And he just lay on the floor and just screamed. And she was embarrassed because he was doing it in my house. And she got on the floor with him and was trying to talk to him and pat him and cuddle him. And I know exactly what she was trying to do. But eventually I said to her, I think he probably just needs a little bit of space. And I'll be with him. Don't worry. Off you go, and I'll let you know. And of course, within a few minutes of me just sitting nearby, and allowing him time to calm down, he came around, and we could talk about what was it that happened. I can't remember what it was now. It was a long time ago. Yeah, what was that trigger that made you so upset? Um, yeah, because it's really important for us to remember when a child is dysregulated, they have completely lost the ability to communicate with us. They're overwhelmed. They're in this flood of emotions, and it's very, very hard for them to manage those emotions. A calm, consistent approach, lovely. I find a lot of parents try things a few times, but say they don't do that at home, or lots of time it's because they are only children in the family or big age differences. I invited them on a day in holidays to all meet at a park, and they could see with their peers and how well they responded to my calm words, and it worked well. That's a really good tip, isn't it? Um, I think, parents are just, I mean, even if you've got more than one child, you're still doing it you've only been a parent the first time ever in your life, haven't you? You haven't got a book to help you. And the way you parent your older child is different to the way you parent your younger children. They don't come with instructions. We're all just winging it, parents especially. But we as early professionals have more experience usually than parents. So that's a really good way, maybe, is to have something like that with parents, and then afterwards um, you can share some of your ideas about how parents could talk to their children. That's a really good example. Thank you for that. Role modeling, my turn. Oh, we've read that one already, haven't we? Lots of positive behaviour. I think we've done this. I think I might have got to the end. Sorry, it's a bit tricky on here because they sort of pop up randomly. Oh, any suggestions for staff to stay calm and have a positive approach and not to get panic? What are they panicking about when a child gets dysregulated? I think I would hold a staff training session, maybe show them this webinar when it comes out on YouTube. And or if you like, if you want some bespoke support, get in touch and myself or Lisa can support your setting with that issue. So I think if you were at our well, gosh, I can't remember which webinar it was in now, but one of the researches things I've read recently is that the majority of children in an early years setting only hear instructional language. They don't hear conversations. They don't have conversations. And so if you're a little person that's only 2 or 3 and what you hear is loud voices from adults who are towering above you all the time, telling you what to do, that can raise the level of anxiety in the setting anyway. So I would say speak to your staff about how they talk to children in general, how the whole ethos of the room or the setting can be calmer and should be calmer. And the way for it to be calmer is for the staff to model calmness, calm all the time. Because I do go into some settings, not any of the people that are on here today, but I have been in some settings in my other role where it's overwhelming for me as an adult, the noise level of the adults talking in quite a loud voice at the children, rather than let's just be calm and talk to children as if there are peers as well, aren't they? We're working with them, and I think if you can start try and embed that, and then talk about what we mean by co-regulation. Perhaps they're not sure what that means, and share some of these examples. Like it's okay to leave that child to calm down when you're not expected to try and solve that child's issues in that one moment. Um, if you want to talk more about that, let me know and we can always have a chat about it. But I would definitely do some staff training on it, on how to support children, staff to be calm and have confidence. I think quite often panicking comes from lack of confidence in your practice. So sometimes embedding some confidence in them can really help. Okay. Thank you for those comments on the Slido. That was really, really insightful and interesting. And I can tell you're all amazing practitioners because, you're all doing all the things that were on the webinar anyway. So before we move on to our coffee and chat thing, here's our upcoming webinars. Next Monday, we're doing Safe Sleep in Practice. This is the new sleep guidance that's come out. I've unpicked it and completely broken it down for everyone. So we're going to go through that. You got me twice next week because then on May the 20th, we're doing embedding maths in your setting. How to make maths part of your continuous provision, not an activity that's outside your continuous provision. On June the 17th, we've got embedding communication and literature in your setting. So a similar thing, but with communication and literature. And I've got someone coming along from the EYEPs to talk about making it real. For those of you who aren't in Essex, Making It Real is a project that's ongoing in Essex at the moment about supporting communication through real life experiences. On July the 7th, I've got someone from Taste Ed. They are a sensory food education group who are I saw them at a conference and I went to one of their workshops, and it's all about encouraging children to explore new foods without pressure. It's really interesting how they do it. So they're going to come and talk to that. And then July the 15th, using Birth to 5 Matters to support your practice. And I know we're getting a new Birth to 5 Matters, but I haven't actually, I haven't seen a date for that yet. Oh, sorry, I can just see another couple of questions here. Any tips for high energy children who rub off each other? One has suspected ADHD. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be quite tricky, isn't it? Because if they're high energy like that, I think, why don't we take this over into the chat, into the coffee and chat, and maybe other people might have some ideas for that, mightn't they? Oh, Marie, the link should just be on the website, but I'll get Damon to pop it up as well, so you can go on to that. Oh, it's there, all right, underneath there. Thank you, Damon. Yeah, look at Damon's Charlie, look at Damon's message, and it's all on there. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. Oh, okay. This is if you can have a look at this later. This is if you want bespoke support or any information. Okay, AI